super talented artist, but also happens to be my beautiful cousin. We were born 2 days apart, and even when we were little, she expressed her creativity through art. As a mixed media artist, Dani was drawn to the world of graffiti through her own incessant urge to create. Many street artists experience the same compulsion and utilize public spaces for their artwork despite the inherent risk. In cities around the world, the role of graffiti has become a cultural medium to connect communities and ideas through art. She manually adds graffiti and street art elements to her own photographs, original photographs, and these visual constructions add dialogue to her personal experience in that place and time. The viewer is drawn into the scene and given the opportunity to produce their own emotive connection to the fabricated environment. Dani's mixed media pieces are a blend of photography, digitally created graffiti, acrylic paint, and LED light behind plexiglass. She received her Bachelor of Design from the Ontario College of Art and Design in 2003, and she's exhibited in Toronto and the US. Her works are held in commercial and private collections in Toronto, New York, Johannesburg, Tel Aviv, Panama City, and Miami. She's with us today to teach us the ins and outs of graffiti and how to create our own tag and piece. Hi, Cuz, take it away.
Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. Oh my goodness, Lily, thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I don't know if all of that's true, all those kind words, but I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank you for including me in LOMAPALOOZA. I am so blessed to be part of this amazing event. It's been such a wonderful day already. And I want to tell you that I'm so proud of all the amazing accomplishments you've achieved over the years, and putting together this really fabulous event today really showcases your lovely, warm, and beautiful heart. Thanks again for letting me help be a part of supporting Food Banks of Canada and Feeding America. These are really crazy times we're living through, and I really hope that in decades to come, we can all look back on this time and know that we all did everything that we could to support others. So welcome to my studio. This is kind of what the inside of my brain looks like, which can be bright and vibrant and a little bit chaotic. I'm gonna walk you through the ins and outs of street art and graffiti today. I'm also gonna show you some of my own pieces, and I'm gonna help you create your own. So if you follow along with me, we'll get started. I'm gonna begin by showing you a piece over here that is titled Sorry About Your Wall. And I'm going to turn it off to show you kind of what, how this light panel thing works that Lauren spoke about. And believe it or not, this piece actually began, if you look close up over here, actually began as a black and white photograph that I took in an alleyway in Italy. And all of my inspiration comes from the actual moment of time where I took the photograph. So you can see the street art elements I created there, which then get blended into this big black and white print on plexiglass. So if you can grab some paper, markers, and pens, we're going to create our own pieces, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit more of that in detail. So the inspiration for the artwork comes from the actual moment I took the photograph. So I take really detailed notes of the culture in that area, the city, of the conversations that I overhear, as well as the actual vibe of the street art and the art scene in that city. And then back in my own studio, I bring that to life into the actual photograph as if it was really there to begin with. And I hope, as Lauren said, to create that emotional connection with the viewer to the moment that I took the photograph. So I'll give you a couple sneak peeks, little peeks over here of the artwork. So this is, as I said, called Sorry About Your Wall. And you'll see that up there on the wall, scrawled over here. You'll also notice this little guy from your favorite 90s video game. There are lots of little funny treasure troves buried within my artwork. And I love to create these Easter eggs so that every time you look at a piece, you discover something new and you find something else to love. And I'm just going to draw your attention to one more thing over here on this wall here. So this tag over here says Ahava, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. I just wanted to show you you know, how something comes full circle. So I'll walk you through my studio here a bit and give you a little bit of a sneak peek. And then I'm going to share my screen with you. Hopefully no one gets motion sick as we move along. This is a piece titled Yes. And this is another piece. This is actually a Lightbox edition print. So this is a little miniature version. This is my first test piece. The final one is coming into my studio hopefully in the next 2 weeks. It's quite a bit larger, but this is a reproduction print with the light panel that that's going to be available soon, which I'm really, really, really excited about. It's been a long time in the making, and they're finally coming together. So join me over here, and I'm going to share my screen with you and give you a little sneak peek into this world. Give me 1 second here. So here we are. All my work begins with a sketch. And we're gonna be doing this today. So again, grab your paper and pens and markers. We're gonna get started in a little bit. But these sketches I turn into graphic elements. And I usually design these in color as a way to plan out the final image. Because remember, I'm painting everything on these big black and white plexiglass panels, but I do the color planning very early on. So I grabbed some colors over here, and this is the palette we're going to be looking at today. So this is how I start. I figure out, you know, from the get-go what the final elements are going to look like and how it's all going to come together. And that's how I begin my planning. So we're going to create something in color, turn it to black and white, and then in a few months from now, when I'm actually at the painting stage, once it's all retouched and done, I'm going to come back around and bring that color palette into it. So these are the graphic elements. These are then printed onto a plexiglass panel. And then as you can see, over a very long period of time, layers and layers and layers of acrylic paint are added in, and the piece comes to life. So this is a piece when it's pretty much finished. And the crazy thing is that through this technique, this is something that I discovered over the years of really experimenting with the medium. I noticed that using different paint techniques, I'm able to bring different elements of the piece forward. So if you look at this sort of drapery here on this overhang, this awning, the feeling of movement really comes to life. So you can get the sense that there's texture that is actually moving. You can enter the scene. And I'll show you in 2 seconds another piece. When it comes to life, you can actually get a sense of dimension there. You feel like you could walk up that staircase and up that fire escape. You feel like you can touch the rust and maybe get some tetanus. The pieces really come to life with the different techniques that I use. And remember, we spoke about different Easter eggs throughout the artwork. You'll see there's, you know, a really cool boombox over here. The word "sup" is buried. There's also the title of the piece, which is called "Carp and All Those DMs." So I'm going to begin with a quick distinction between tags and more complicated graffiti pieces. So these are tags that I've created over the years. And if you think back a few minutes, this is the piece over here. It says Ahava. That was the really quick sketch I did originally that ended up making it into the artwork I first showed you. We then get into really more complicated and intricate forms. And as works like this are involve several different colors and layers, they clearly take a bit more time. So on the street, a tag would be a really quick thing, like it's called a throw up, that would take 3 seconds that you can do and not be, you know, without the fear of getting caught. These larger pieces are a lot more time intensive, and they're a lot more revered in the world of graffiti writers as well. So they're usually done by the cover of night or over several days sometimes, and even sometimes with permission on certain walls. So my inspiration comes from a little bit from my background in design, but really from writers and street artists from around the world. So we've talked a little bit about tags and graffiti, but now I want to move on to street art. So these are beautiful mural paintings, sometimes done with spray paint, brushes, stencils, even jackhammers. And more cities around the world are recognizing the transitional power of public art and are either gifting blank walls to artists or even commissioning pieces. So this is a huge change from decades ago, and I hope to see more of it. This is Wynwood Walls in Miami, and this entire neighborhood transitioned from a derelict place you would not want to visit to a place full of art and culture. It's like immensely safe now. It's really turned the whole neighborhood around. And this was, I think this Wynwood Walls began, I want to say about 10 years ago, but since then, a lot of other areas around the world have taken this model and transformed their own districts to bring and really use the power of graffiti for good. So these are some artists I want to show you. This is Indy 184. She came from South America and she's been living in New York since she was little. And she's using, in her work, a lot of those really quick throw-ups we talked about, bubble letters and 80s and 90s style graphics layered with portraiture. And using that same technique as another pair, this is Pichiavo, who's a duo from Spain. And they've used the exact same idea with, really quick throw-ups, graffiti style little shout-outs in their street tags. But layered on top of it, they use these beautiful Romanesque or Greek statues. And if you remember, this is all done with spray paint. This is a very, very large mural done over quite a bit of time. And I can only imagine the amount of, how difficult it was to create this using spray paint. So this is an artist named Lady Aiko, and she's from Brooklyn. And she's originally from Japan, and you can see that she uses her cultural background as a reference point in her works. And so it clearly looks very different from what we've already seen. And we're going to shift again into something else. This is how far street art can go. This is a sculptural piece of street art. And this is from Portugal. And he uses things like jackhammers and knives and drills and really fun tools to actually take apart his canvas, which is the wall, and bring it to life in these really, really gorgeous and moving portraits. So this is an artist who goes by the name of Risk, and it's a beautiful example of how you can manipulate the exact same 4-letter forms, an R, an I, an S, and a K, in a multitude of ways. So we're gonna look closer into that now, and as I give you a sneak peek of how a transition from a simple street name tag can become an intricate piece. So you can see how he's transitioned from, this work, which is quite simple and legible and easy to read, to something that is very, very hard to discern unless you speak the language of street art and can figure out, the actual letter forms buried within this. So often when I begin either a tag or more complicated piece, I reference one of the several graffiti alphabets I've developed myself over time. So I think a lot of street artists probably do this. This is something that I found very helpful. If you have your paper and your pens and markers ready to go, now's the time to whip them out. So think about what you would like to do, what name you'd like to use, what your street name would be. If you want to give a gift to your great aunt or your dog, grab your pens and use these letters and these alphabets to pick and choose different elements. And I'm going to leave these all up on the screen in a little bit so you can go back and forth, but I'm just going to walk you through them really quick. And my other advice to you is to use the whole page. Don't be shy to make marks, make mistakes, scratch them out, grab a new piece of paper, and make changes as you go. And then once you have your basic tag, we're going to beef them up a little bit with a little more style, just like old school bubble letters. So this is actually an evolution of the screen 1 second ago. So you can see how we just sort of thickened it up a bit and played with the forms a tiny little bit. So as we, earlier today, I did a really quick whip up of a little sketch. So usually these markings would be done with spray paint or with a nice drippy marker on a wall somewhere. Graffiti is kind of like an I was here, and writers gain notoriety for hard to reach, like really high traffic spots or moving targets or moving canvases similar to like a freight train. So there's a really complicated hierarchy within the world. So if you plan on scrawling your name on a wall somewhere and it's over someone else's artwork, I warn you to be careful because it's not going to go over well. There's there's a very interesting dynamic between the worlds, and it's fabulous to get involved in. And there's a lot of real interesting things at play within the world, and there's a lot of really beauty to see once you get involved in it. So here is a quick sketch that I did earlier, and this is something that I feel is quite topical. With both COVID and the amazing revolutionary protests occurring around the world, I want to reach out to all my fellow humans and tell them I want to hold your hand. From its earliest stage, graffiti has always been a way to share a message and connect with others, and I hope to do just that. The next step in this process is, again, to beef it up with and make it more dimensional, and add a little bit more embellishment. So here I worked a little bit harder on some of the letter forms and really made sure that I had all the style I wanted in there, and thought about how the pieces would overlay each other and how they came together. So sorry about that. I meant to flip to the screen earlier so you guys can take a quick look. In 1 second, I'm going to flip to Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how this sketch gets flushed out. So if you have your own artwork ready to go, now's the time where we're going to work on outlining and pulling it all together. So this is how that sketch came together with a really thin outline. So on this end, I'm going to grab my drawing tablet, and this is something that I've used for several years now. It's a Wacom tablet, and using this and this mechanical pen is always a starting point for my final pieces. So when you're working on your graffiti, some tips. The first thing is you do not want it to be perfect. You really want to keep the lines variable in thickness. You want it to look like it's hand-drawn. So I'm going to show you how that comes together here. So the earlier sketch gets filled out a little bit, and you can see if I zoom in a bit, how there is a little bit of waviness in the lines and how some lines were thicker than others, and this brings a lot of depth to it, as well as, again, giving it that the hand-drawn feel. You can tell really quickly if something's a computer-generated font or if it is hand-drawn, and these are the things that sort of give you that feeling inside if you feel that it's not quite exactly perfect. So this outline was a little bit thicker, but we have to add a little color to it, obviously, right? So we've got our basic green that I've layered in, and then I wanted to add this really nice sort of drippy, bubbly, darker tone with a darker tone below it. And to beef it up even more, here's a really beautiful, vivid purple. And if you remember back to our color palette a little while ago, these are colors that I set a while ago and had in my head. And then I did not forget about our top bit here. So now we have our final bit, I Want to Hold Your Hand. So if you look at the I Wanna, there is some highlights, there's kind of this sort of three-dimensional aspect to it and some layering. And this final piece, we're gonna pull into another piece into the photograph, and I'm just gonna show you quickly how it actually blends into the final artwork. Actually, sorry, before I do that, I wanna show you one more thing. Adding to my message, I had the idea of creating two hands reaching across the void to each other. So the arms are kind of Gumby-ish as they try to join together. And to me, this shows a real effort to understand each other and to come together and support. So now we're going to go into the document, which shows, this is the original photograph I took in New York. And again, just to tell you this, this piece was photographed and retouched quite a bit in Photoshop to bring up the high contrast. And I'm going to go in closely now and show you some of the fun bits that I've added. So these are other graffiti elements that I've been working on for the past few weeks. And this has already been an intensive process. So you can see I'm adding everything throughout here. And now I can show you where our where our artwork has landed. So here you can see, I want to hold your hand, and this is it in its, you know, in its basic, in its graphic form. But we want to make it look like this piece is really blended into the wall as if it was there in the initial photograph. So I'm going to turn these layers off really quickly and show you what it looks like with quite a bit of time processing. So it gives it a little bit more of a spray painted look. It has a texture to it. You can see some of the bricks coming through. We're going to do a little bit more work to make it even more three-dimensional. I've also, you can see here, erased parts of it so that it's hidden behind the fire escape, behind this banister here. We're going to wrap it around this wall here in 1 second. So I've separated this into different sections. We've got this part of the hand on the right-hand side. And I'm going to move that up the wall a little bit to give it a little more depth. And then adding some shadow work behind it really gives it that three-dimensional feel. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see how the brickwork is buried throughout the graffiti and how you can see bits of it coming through. I also want to give you a little bit of sneak peek at some other elements within here. So this is, everyone recognizes, this is Waldo buried over here. And there's also some, the power, this is the power of the high five. This is something that I think we're all missing around these days. And this piece over here took quite a bit of time to do. As you can see, it's buried along into the brick and sort of wrapping around all these extruding bits behind this, this pole. And then over the word one way, I've added the word love. So this is the final piece. And again, this is going to be printed in black and white. This is going to be printed in black and white, and then I will be hand painted. So I'm going to show you what that panel looks like. So this is what the actual print is going to be. It's going to be printed on this large sheet of acrylic panel like this. And then the back of it are going to be layers and layers and layers of acrylic paint. And you're going to see through that all the textural elements coming through, which is going to bring it to life. And looking, thinking back to what the actual artwork looked like, there's a lot of depth within the photograph. And so the final piece will feel like you can really walk down that pathway and, you know, and walk down that street and join and jump on one of those motorbikes and head down the road. So if there's anything else, we've got some time for questions and answers now. I am happy to answer everything. If you guys have any feedback, if you want to know anything, so please feel free to ask. And thank you again for joining me today. It was really fun to give you a little sneak peek into my process. I'd also love it if you guys could show me some of the artwork you've created on your ends. And I'm going to post up on Instagram. Oh, Lauren.
Am I a graffiti artist now?
You are. I love you. I love that. That's really, really great. I'm going to post up on my Instagram the graffiti alphabets I did earlier to show you guys and see if you want to follow along. Please feel free to send them along to me and tag LOMAPALOOZA. So I'd love to see your artwork.
Amazing. Thanks, Dan. I think this is an incredible, you're so talented and such an incredibly intensive process. How long does it take you from start to finish, and what part of the process is the longest?
That's a really good question. I think the start to finish, it depends on the size of the piece. So the quickest I've done a piece is just under 2 months. So the retouching part takes me is about a third of the process. And you can see the elements that I created. Just the element I showed you today, I want to hold your hand, would take me about 2 days to do. And thinking back to the final piece I showed you, there are, I want to say, like 15 to 20 different elements buried within that. So it takes me quite a bit of time to design the pieces, blend them into the photograph, and really make them appear like they were there originally and make them feel like a part of the scene. And then the painting process is a whole other step. So you've seen up in my studio, I can spend, a day working on a 2 square inch section, which is pretty intricate and takes quite a bit of time. But what I found is the more layers I added, the layering technique I use is where the magic comes into it. So that's where I'm able to create that real 3-dimensional feel and have the piece come to life as if you could really enter the scene.
Amazing. And we have another question here. How do you change the perspective to match the angle of the walls? I think this is.
Oh, that's so interesting. So unfortunately today, what I was transferring our image onto a very flat wall. But within Photoshop, there's a whole bunch of tools. One, it's a very simple transformation tool where you can bend and tweak different angles of it. And over the years of doing this for, I think, 8 years now, I have a real sense of what the final angle needs to be to match and to give that perspective. So that has been a little bit of a learning curve to figure out, how to blend it in to feel like it was part of it. But if there's like a doorway and it's overlapping part of the doorway, the doors are at different angles, each piece of that graphic gets divided up and sectioned off, and each piece gets treated separately so that they each work on in their own angles. And again, if part of it's over a window frame and part of it's over some bricks, again, those are different ways of treating that to feel like it's part of it. But the more I work it, the more it feels like it's really there.
So much incredible attention to detail. It's mind-boggling. Jamie has a question. She's wondering, where did the inspiration come from to use this medium of art, and how long have you been doing this for?
Oh, I love that. I've been doing this for 9 years now. So the inspiration came, I worked in advertising as an art director for 12 years, and I loved it. It was an amazing creative job. It fulfilled the business side of my brain as well as the art side of my brain. And at the end of working crazy hours, I would come home and still have the urge to create. And I really felt a deep connection to street artists who had that same incessant urge to create. Like they needed to get their message out and needed to go up on a wall. They had a message to communicate, and they just couldn't live without doing it. And I had some really fabulous photos of Toronto street art, and I started playing with different mediums. I worked on canvases, doing photo transfers and painting on top of it, and blending the disciplines that I've been trained in, photography and design, typography and painting, and bringing that together on canvas. And then I thought to inverse it and to do it on the back of plexiglass. So this transition was really a big spark. And then as I painted it, I was working on the back of the piece, which is really complicated, obviously, because I needed to figure out if my paintbrush is over here, what's it going to look like on this side? And as I was painting, I was working in front of this gorgeous window over here, and the light transformed the paint, and that's where this technique was really born. So from a bunch of years of experimentation and just being open to new ideas and open to playing with new mediums, that's where this came from.
And you don't just use a paintbrush, right? I think I've seen you use a knife to scratch away at certain areas. I don't know what other tools you use.
Yes. So I have a favorite knife, and then a bunch of other knives I use as well. But to make it look like the graffiti is on the wall, it's blended in and integral to the scene, I use knives, I use acetone, I use steel wool, and I wear away different sections. Actually, I can show you right here. I'll give you a quick sneak peek of what that looks like. This piece over here, you can see where the paint has been scratched away and worn away, and you can see the texture not only of the paint brush strokes, but also of the texturization.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. And we have a question. What's your favorite piece you've ever done, and do you still have it? And if you don't, was it hard to part with it?
Oh my goodness. I really love all my pieces. That's a hard question, because the truth is I there are ones that are special for different reasons. There are ones that I've worked on for so many months that when they left my studio, I felt like a big void. But in truth, I know the pieces I'm creating are for others. And I know that they're going to go into really wonderful homes. And for some reason, all my collectors are really just the nicest people. And I have a collector who I met random. I've never even met them, from Atlanta. And we formed a connection. And even just by the constant emails, we still have gone back and forth a year after the piece is purchased. We still have this connection. I know that the sadness of the pieces leaving is overcome by the joy that I know that it's bringing to other people's lives. And I know that I'm creating this for other people, and I have something to share, and I'm happy that I get to share it, and I'm happy that that it does bring joy to other people, and hopefully, witnesses some really amazing memories in other people's lives.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I know they do for sure. And speaking of sharing, you've also have on your website right now coloring pages, which are free for people to download. What was the inspiration for posting those? How have people been using them? And I know we'll share in the chat a link for everybody where to find them and do some coloring of their own, but maybe you can talk about those before we say goodbye.
Yeah, so when we came into lockdown, what was it, 97 and a half months ago or something like that. I have 3 kids. I have 3 small boys, and we were home. We were homeschooling, doing all these activities. I needed my own creative outlet because with all the homeschooling and all of that, I wasn't getting much actual work done. I wanted to give something, for something to give people like that sort of mental break. So thinking back to childhood, I very often would be like buried in a corner somewhere, quietly coloring. And there's a joy that brings to me, and a relaxation and a meditative state that I think it helps. So from one perspective, I wanted to give people a sort of release from the stress of the unknown. I think we're hopefully over that stress and that panic because we're just used to it now. But at the beginning, it was a little bit chaotic. But secondly, one of the pages is a thank you to the frontline workers. And I really wanted people to I wanted a way to say thank you for everyone who's working so hard for us. And I know that others have been coloring those pages and dropping them off at doors of, people they know who are on the front lines, leaving them in their windows for, passersby to see. So I wanted a way for people to share love and to spread that, throughout our community. And people have been coloring them, and they've been really, they've been great. So I'm hoping the piece I did today, I'm hoping to turn it into another piece. Again, I'll make sure to share the link. And again, to find a way to connect with people and share.
Love it. And we hope if you do download, for those participating, if you do download the coloring pages, you'll share your artwork with us and tag Dani at Dani Cooperman and LOMAPALOOZA. We'd love to see all what you've learned and what you've been working on. So please share with us. And Dan, thank you so much for your light and your beauty and your talent and for sharing that today. Really appreciate it. And we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me again. Thank you for letting me participate in this amazing event. And I look forward to some great presentations coming up. And thank you again to everybody. Love you all. See you all soon.
Bye, Dan. Thank you.